Hello, welcome to Imperial Forge Cosplay. Today, I'll be showing you how I made the Zelda Master Sword. So, for a project of this magnitude, I always start with STLs. And STLs, I immediately go to Thingiverse, because they're free. I found some good files that I liked, and I downloaded them. I popped them right over into my slicer called Orca Slicer, which I would definitely recommend. It's like a mix of bamboo slicer and Prusa slicer. It was really hard to find on the internet, partially because I wasn't reading anything. So if you do go find it, actually read what the website says. It's actually super useful. For this slice, I turned on tree supports because I just like them better for weird angled things. Usually I do the other ones, but this one had some weird angles, so I did tree supports. I printed all of the pieces at the same time on a Cheatytech X-Max 3. They came out super good, as it always does on this printer. After the bed cools down, the pieces pop right off, which sometimes makes it difficult to pull the whole magnetic bed out without all of the pieces coming out, which is what happened here. Brought them over to my workbench and started pulling all the pieces off. I then removed all of the supports. These supports came off very easily, except for on the one piece where I used a screwdriver to pry them off. The brims come off just as easy, and some pieces I had to use a knife, but it didn't take very much effort. After lining all the pieces up, I turned around and started gluing them on my gluing and painting desk. I did this using a soldering iron and a bottle of Gorilla Super Glue that I found at my local grocery store. You may be thinking, why was super glue at a grocery store? And I just had that same thought not 2 seconds ago. And honestly, I have no clue. But thank you for carrying it, because I didn't want to drive all the way to Lowe's. How convenient. All the pieces had slots in them in which you could insert little pieces of plastic to help keep them and align them better. But I forgot to slice those, and I'm lazy enough that I didn't want to go upstairs and reslice them. So I just ended up gluing them together and holding it with my own hands. After finishing that up, here comes the fun part. Sanding and priming. If you've ever done a 3D printed prop before, you know that this is the most painful part of the build. It's the most dreaded part, especially when something like this comes in pieces, because every single seam line needs to be hidden. I primed this project with a filler primer, automotive filler primer to be exact, which I got all the way at Lowe's. After another round of 80 grit sandpaper, I put on some what's called Bondo. And of course, If you have ever watched or I've done 3D printing props before, you know exactly what this stuff is. If you use it, I recommend wearing a respirator because it's stinky. After all of the areas that needed to be bondoed were bondoed, I primed it again and sanded it again. In here, you see me going over it with a pretty low grit sanding block, and this is to give it that really nice smooth finish. I went over the more elevated areas with an X-Acto knife because it was just faster than the sanding block, and I continued to sand block it. Then I moved on to painting. For the start of the painting, I put a silver chrome on the blade. I have no idea what this stuff is. I got it at Lowe's. It was cheap. There was a little dust something on there, so I just peeled that off and painted over it. I wouldn't recommend doing that either. I didn't worry about taping this part off because I knew I would just paint the purplish blue handle over that. This part I did tape off because I wanted the silver to remain silver. After completely taping the blade off, I put purple airbrush paint in my airbrush. I didn't actually know this before, but airbrush paint is like runny paint. I'm pretty sure you can put anything that is spray outable in an airbrush, but the runniness of the airbrush paints are really useful for actually painting with an airbrush. That seems pretty simple, but I must say it anyway. After making sure it was actually coming out, I went crazy with it because all it needed to be was purple. After finishing with the purple, I moved on to the green. I didn't have any regular green acrylic paint, so I just put some airbrush paint on one of those little sponge brushes and went over what seemed to be the cloth parts. Off camera, I made the emblem and logo thing on the front black and gold, but I forgot to record that, so apologies. Here's the finished product. Please be sure to like and subscribe, and hit that notifications button so you know when I come out with new stuff. Thank you so much for watching. This has been Imperial Forge Cosplay. See you later.